Welcome to the Captains at Center Ice podcast. As always, click that like and subscribe button and leave a comment down below on your opinions as well as what you thought about today's topics. Without further ado, let's bring the captains to center ice. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Captains at Center Ice podcast. I'm wearing a Chicago Blackhawks hat in solidarity with my good friend Will Hatczel, who you can see just to the left of me over here. Will, say hi to everyone.
Hello, everyone out there. Josh, I'm glad to see you wear a Blackhawks hat. I know it's more for like the mourning situation we have going on with this struggling team, but you look good in Blackhawks apparel. I'll give you that.
Well, no.
Okay, fine.
No.
So try to be nice to start off.
No, you're fine. I bought this hat a while ago, and by a while ago I mean last year. And I have a rule. Whenever I go to see a live NHL game, and I go to a team's arena or whatever, I have to get a hat, just one. It doesn't have to be every time. I just have to get a hat at one of the times I go. So I didn't get one the first time I went, which was back in 2016, and I went to see Anaheim and Chicago play at the United Center. I did not get a hat then, but I went to go see San Jose and Chicago play last December, actually, and I was like, I have to get a hat. So this is the hat I got, because I thought it looked cool.
That's a nice hat.
So, yeah, I partially saw Patrick Kane wearing it and was like, I want that hat. So, probably a dumb reason to buy the hat, but so...
I'd rather have a skill. The hat comes second, you know?
Yeah, it's not really about the hands, it's about the hat. How does the hat look, So, anyway, to those of you listening, you've never probably seen Will Hatczel before, and if you have, you've been following the podcast for a long time. So Will is a good friend of mine from Ball State. We were in a student organization together, as was Ryan in that same organization. We ended up doing podcasts together up there, although he didn't hop on the NHL podcast up there as much as I wanted him to, but still hopped on enough from time to time and gave us his thoughts. Now he has his own radio show. Will, do you want to go ahead and plug yourself here? Because that would be perfect for you to kind of do that.
Yeah, sure. So I work I have a radio show on an online internet station. It's called sportstownchicago.com is where you could find it. And the show is called Windy City Sports Talk because we're based out of the western suburbs of Chicago. So just wanted to talk about the local sports scene out there. Of course, I'm a big Chicago sports fan for Blackhawks and Bears and all that good stuff. So, yeah, the show runs every Wednesday from 3 to 5 p.m. Eastern or Central Time, which would be 4 to 6 Eastern Time. And, I try to get some other local journalists and reporters and people that cover the teams, even try to get some unique interviews, too, maybe with former players or like the Chicago Bears superfan, Bearman, who just got inducted into the NFL Hall of Fame. Just try to make it. That's the goal, is to work in the radio industry and maybe host my own official radio show one day. But yeah, you can catch me there. Again, you could watch online on Facebook, the live stream. Again, at Facebook, you just go search Sportstown Chicago for their Facebook page, or you can listen in on the TuneIn app or also on sportstownchicago.com.
Yeah, and I mean, it's a cool place to listen to Will talk. He talks all sports, not just hockey. If you're a Chicago fan of any sort.
And Josh comes on once in a while too. You're my go-to hockey guy right now. So we have many conversations on there.
I hop on from time to time. I'm not sure my advice is the most elite advice in terms of hockey, but I do come on from time to time, hopped on with the whole Babcock situation.
Yes, Don Cherry too.
And Don Cherry. There was a couple good times on there. But yeah, please check out Will. Obviously he lives in Chicago. Um, so, but yeah, so that is Will Hatczel for you, and he will be obviously talking the Central Division for us. There's a very specific reason, as if you can't tell already, why we brought him on for the Central Division, and that is because he's a Blackhawks fan. Um, and also Ryan down below me. Ryan, say hi.
Hello, listeners. It's good to be back.
Yep, Ryan is also a Central Division fan of the Colorado Avalanche. So this will be interesting, seeing the top of the standings and the bottom of the standings in terms of like how do we view the Central Division and whatnot. Uh, I don't have a team, so I'm kind of more neutral, I guess, if you will, in this podcast. So being a Rangers and a Ducks fan, I kind of get to watch this division play itself out a little bit more neutrally. But that being said, let's give a little breakdown, if you will, of the Central Division. So I'm gonna give the standings here, and I'm gonna go from top or bottom to top here. So at number 7, now keep in mind, I should probably also mention this before I start this. There are only 7 teams in the Central Division right now. It's the only division that has 7. All the other divisions have
Kaya.
8. So there are 8 divisions in both the Metropolitan, the Atlantic, and also in the Pacific. Once Seattle comes in, Arizona is going
Likely.
over to the Central Division, from what I hear.
And I think Seattle's going to the Pacific then.
Yeah, and that would make sense.
Mhm.
So that is, just know that we're a team short in this entire breakdown. So here we go. Let's break down the entire division. So Chicago, number 7. Number 6, we have Nashville. Number 5, Minnesota. Number 4, Winnipeg. Number 3, Dallas. Number 2, Colorado. And number 1, St. Louis. All right. So, that being said, let's talk about Chicago a little bit, shall we? So,
Well,
Will,
wait. Are we going to do our rankings?
we'll do that. We're gonna do that after.
Oh, okay.
We're gonna break down first, and we'll give our
Okay.
thoughts and opinions on the team here. Um, so um, let's start off here. So Chicago. Uh, Will, I'm gonna give you the floor here. Your thoughts and opinions on Chicago. Give me your what's good, what's bad, and what changes need to be made, and we'll start with that. So, Will, what are your thoughts here?
Well, not that there's a whole lot of good to talk about, unfortunately, but there is some credit and praise that needs to be given out. And I mean, really, the two bright spots of this team this year have been Patrick Kane and Robin Lehner. Robin Lehner, I'm not sure how he landed with the Blackhawks on a 1 year deal. He was like a top 3 goaltender last year with the Islanders. He has stood on his head on numerous occasions for this team, and just all the saves he's been making, all the shots he faces, he's kept this team. The Hawks are falling out of relevancy right now. They're so close to being out of this playoff fight and picture for good. But Robin Lehner has just been phenomenal, and it's just the way he's been playing. He's been a reliable goaltender. So really good pickup by the Hawks on that. And then of course you have Patrick Kane, who is always. The funny thing is he's playing his best years of his career now, even after the dynasty run with winning 3 cups and all those playoff appearances. He's been scoring more points, more goals. I would say he was a star player back then, but now he really has become a superstar. He's got 47 points this year, 20 goals already, 27 assists. He's trying to do everything he can with this team right now. The whole team's on his back, and Unfortunately, it takes more than just one player in hockey to get you to the promised land. But those two have been the bright spots. Robin Leonard, great in net. Patrick Kane playing like a superstar, continuing to add to the records and work his way up to really to become probably a top 3, top 5 all-time Blackhawk player and one of the best to ever play the game in general. So that's the good. The bad is all over the place. You have poor special teams because outside of Patrick Kane, this team has struggled to find offense and people to produce. And when I say special teams, I mean the whole thing. The power play unit's one of the worst. The penalty kill is very bad because in general the defense is very bad. And a lot of this has to do with injuries because Calvin DeHaan's now out for the season. Brent Seabrook's out for the season. Seabrook has to have 3 surgeries in the next 3 months. So who knows? This could be it for his career. We don't know yet. But between the injuries, even on the offensive side of the roster, you got Shaw, Kajula, Saad. Those guys are out, and those were really key secondary depth scoring guys that they haven't been able to play because of injuries. So just all around, it's been a pretty bad season for this team. I'm not a fan of Coach Colleton. I don't think he's managing games the right way or the roster. And while I talk about players that have been playing well, I have to put a couple under the microscope, and that includes Dylan Strome, Alex DeBrincat, and Jonathan Toews. They've all 3 of them have had quiet seasons, and all 3 of them haven't even scored over 10 goals yet. The production is pretty low. They're not helping Patrick Kane that much, even when they're on the same line as him. They're average. They've had some good games. I'll give them that. DeBrincat scored against the Islanders the other night. I was at that game, but some of your key players haven't been playing well. And lastly, with changes, like what needs to be done, what changes need to be made, I think it's time that the front office looks to be big time sellers. I think you have to find a way to deal a couple of players away that you don't need, free up some roster money. I think they have to find a way to move on from Brent Seabrook. He's not worth paying that kind of money for a guy that is going to have 3 surgeries and may not even be anywhere close to himself again. I think you let Corey Crawford walk in free agency and give all the money in the world to Robin Leonard because I think he should be the future goaltender of this team. He's proved it. He's earned it. And then lastly, I would even consider, because maybe this will end up being a little bit of a conversation point later, who knows, but I really think it's time that the Hawks consider trading a big piece, and I'm talking about Jonathan Toews. You're paying a guy $10 or $11 million, and he ultimately he's a 50, 60 point getter a season now. He's not elite level anymore. His leadership qualities are fantastic, but you can't just be a great locker room leader and a locker room presence. You have to produce on the rink, especially if you're going to be making that kind of money. So big changes need to come to Chicago.
Yeah, I think that's a fair breakdown of the Chicago Blackhawks. Yeah, I'll give my thoughts here in a second, but Ryan, I want to hear what you have to say from someone who sees kind of you're kind of top of the food chain right now as a Colorado fan and with the Colorado team. How do you view the Chicago Blackhawks currently in the season?
I wanted to kind of piggyback off of what Will said about trading a big piece. I think they have to take it one step further and maybe see what they can get for Patrick Kane, because what he could do for a franchise and giving you pieces back, rebuild mode, like draft picks, maybe a younger centerman that is up and coming, like maybe a Brock Besser or something like that. That might be something you might want to look at, because that would be a good talent to see in a Blackhawks uniform. And he was up for a Calder Trophy a couple of years ago and looked really good before his injury happened. I know Vancouver signed him up for another contract, but I mean, I think it's fair to try to see what you can get for Patrick Kane. And then for good, I would say Leonard, just like Will said, he's been outstanding. Kane's been outstanding. And I think they have a lot of good young defenseman pieces that just need time on the ice and need experience that can really develop. But overall, their defense, Duncan Keith, I don't know why he still has ice time. Crawford's aging; he should be let go, and then get if DeBrincat should be maybe on the first line and take Taves to the second line. That's my thoughts, but I think a reset mode would be really good for the Blackhawks, and I think it would be an interesting what they could do if they traded some of the big pieces. What like the Colorado traded Duchesne and got a lot back,
Yeah.
and that really reset the franchise to a better stage.
Yeah. And not only that, I think it changed the locker room atmosphere from a
Mm-hmm.
Colorado perspective too,
Mm-hmm.
right? And like here's the thing. I just part of me kind of wonders if some of this could be fixed with just a simple coach change. But I mean, there's still a lot that needs to be fixed, but maybe it's a good thing that Colleton's behind the net for Chicago, because if you had a coach who was super competent at what he did and was able to get players to play to their full capabilities who's been in the league for a while, then maybe Chicago would be more of a threat in right now in the league. And then maybe the spotlight on Chicago would not be there because they'd be like, well, we're okay because we have a good coach behind the bench. And so maybe that's something I think that needs to really be looked at is coaching.
But who's out there that could change the team with that significant of a boost? That's the thing. That's where I don't see it. Like Barry Trotz is not on the table.
Right. And I guess that's a good question. Maybe you do what you did, what Dallas and New York did, and go hop into the college level. I mean, David Quinn has done outstanding things for the New York Rangers with a lineup that is mediocre at best. Um, so maybe you look for someone at the college level. Maybe there's someone at another junior coach that you bring in. I don't know. I I guess the question for me is cannot be really answered because I'm not really sure how to answer that question because what you bring up is a valid point. There is not really right now a good coach to bring in. And I don't think Chicago's going to hop on the Mike Babcock bandwagon. I think Mike Babcock would have been a solid pickup had the whole scandal not gone down with Mike Babcock.
Well, yeah, now you don't even know if he's
No,
even
he
going to
won't
get
get
a
a
job
job.
again.
He won't get
Yeah.
a job, I don't
Right.
think.
Right. And so like without that scandal, everyone wants Mike Babcock, right? But now
Maybe.
that scandal's happened, Chicago really has to take a hard look and go, who's really out there that we want in our organization. And not only that, Chicago has enough spotlight on them from a coaching perspective too, because they have some scandal going on in the lower levels too.
I mean,
Um,
Will, do you see a quick fix solution?
There is none because here's the thing: it is this issue that the Hawks are having, guys, is it's a bigger hole than you think because this isn't just simply a coaching change or hey, we need to get a little bit younger or start drafting, some good prospects the future. It's all of those things, but also, in my opinion, a time for a change in the front office too. Stan Bowman, every move he's made for the past 4 or 5 seasons, I'm going to say since 2016, every trade, everything he does, it doesn't pan out. He trades all these players away in hopes that these younger guys or these prospects are going to come through and they're going to play well and they're going to be those difference makers. And a lot of them haven't turned out to be that way. Even his draft picks, he'll draft guys like Vinny Hinostroza, Nick Schmaltz, and they play on the roster, but they never become that future winger or that future centerman. They're always on the cusp players, and then they end up devaluing them, and then they go and send them off like they traded Hinostroza and Schmaltz last year to Arizona to acquire Dylan Strome. And Dylan Strome was a fantastic pickup, but again, it's another guy where he's good. He's a good depth guy they have, but is he a top centerman of this team? Is he going to be a top offensive producer and a goal scorer? we've seen potential, but we're not living up to that potential in his first full year in Chicago. So the thing is, you have a front office who didn't like Coach Q, and that's why they fired him. And they're big fans of Colleton. So I think it's a tough situation where you're going to see more changes at the player level than you're going to see with management or coaching staff because that's what they believe in. Though I'm not a fan of Colleton, I wouldn't care if they fired him right now because he doesn't manage the roster the right way, even with what they have, which I know isn't a lot, and even his, in-game coaching style and management. Like when I went to the Islanders game a couple of nights ago, we're winning 3-1 and going into the second period, all of a sudden we're playing defense the entire time. And you know what they say, a 2-goal lead is
The worst
the
lead.
worst to have in hockey. Now, luckily, the Islanders just couldn't catch a break on some opportunities, and they truly didn't play well. They did have a sloppy game. They even changed goaltenders like 8 minutes against in the first period against the Hawks. So it wasn't a good game for them. But there were many times the Hawks let they slipped. Some of their opportunities slipped away, and then they let the Islanders get a lot of opportunities to come back into the game, and luckily it didn't come back to bite them. So this is not a quick fix, guys. It's a big hole that they have to dig themselves out of, and I'm not sure they're going to do it. I don't foresee this team becoming playoff caliber anytime soon because I don't have faith from top to bottom in this organization right now.
Do you think it's a systemic issue?
Uh, Yes and no, because again, I think it just all trickles down from the front office.
Yeah.
So many pieces were traded away for the cup runs, which is totally fine. But now that it's time to start drafting and getting your future, or even guys to complement Kane and Tays, if you're going to keep working with these guys, it hasn't panned out. There hasn't been. We don't have a future star player right now that we feel comfortable filling in the shoes of a Patrick Kane or a Jonathan Tays when they leave. There is nobody. Even I'm not that confident in DeBrincat, Strome, Saad, Shaw. I mean, they're big name players in the city of Chicago, but they're not taking over. They're not gonna be the guys that lead this team to the next batch of glory years. That they're not the guys.
So what I'm hearing from you, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that basically Chicago's in a full rebuild, whether people like it or not, and they have to deal with right now. It's like the beginning stages of where they have to evaluate what they need to keep and what they need to get rid of, and that includes management. And I agree with you on the management piece as well because I think management's a huge issue. Um, I think Stan Bowman needs to be let go. They need to get someone else in that position,
A new mindset, a new
a,
vision.
a new mindset, because I feel like he actually accelerated the whole process. I know that probably wasn't his intention, but he accelerated the whole process because he traded away. I mean, as much as I like, as much as Dylan Strome has done for the Chicago Blackhawks, he traded away two players who were decent depth players in Hinostroza and Schmaltz. I didn't think they were that bad to get rid of. Not only that, I mean, as much as I like Brandon Saad and thought that he was a key piece to the 2015 Cup run, they got rid of Panarin for him, and we're all seeing how Panarin is playing out in New York right now by
Trade
himself.
hurts me every time to this day.
Well, and so the interesting thing about that trade, and I won't stay on it long, but the interesting thing about that trade is that in Columbus, I didn't think Panarin actually played that well. So I find that very intriguing. And so when he got traded to New York, I thought it was a little bit of a risky move from New York because I thought that Panarin, I mean, he had some outstanding plays while in Columbus, but overall, I thought he was relatively average. And so in my head, I was worried about that. Uh, but yeah, no, he got rid of Panarin, and that, I mean, we're talking about a line with Patrick Kane and Panarin, and then whoever you want to throw on the center position, really. And you're talking about one of the most dynamic duos. Like if they were still together, I think your dynamic duos would be, you know, Patrice Bergeron and David Pasternak, um, Nathan McKinnon and
Rico Rantanen.
Mikko Rantanen, Connor McDavid, and Leon Draisaitl, and then you'd have to throw in Patrick Kane and Artemi Panarin if they were still together.
Absolutely.
And I don't think that you're never going to get that again. Um, so yeah, correct me if I'm wrong. I'm just hearing full rebuild is basically what I'm hearing from you.
That's what needs to happen, but again, it's the front office that simply they're fighting very hard against that. That's why you still see Kane and Tays around and even Keith and Seabrook. I mean, it's really almost impossible to move Seabrook because of his injury status and then the money he's making. Nobody wants to take on that kind of contract, or the Hawks would have to throw in some good draft picks or maybe one or two of their best prospects to literally sell him to a team. They're not even, they're not even allowing a team to buy him. They're going to practically give him away because that's how desperate they are to free up that money. But is that going to happen now? I'm not sure unless
That's why I
Seabrook
said.
retires. I don't know.
That's why I said like maybe you should look even higher to trade not only Taves but Patrick Kane to see what you're offered and to see what you could get.
So I think the interesting thing, I think I land a little bit differently than you, Ryan. I think the push
Because you're not gonna win a cup with Kane at this point. The Stanley Cup windows have shut, I think.
No, yeah, it's shut. I mean, the playoff window's not even open.
I guess that's fair. I guess if you're Chicago, you make an offer to Kane, but you actively seek to trade Taves.
At,
That's how I look at it.
at least do the due diligence and start looking at what you could get in the market. I mean, no one's saying you have to trade them for sure, but
I guess it's fair in terms of the Kane. You can make a fair argument for the Kane argument too because Kane's not getting any younger. And to be honest, I mean he plays well, but right now it's a lot of effort for him right now to carry a Chicago Blackhawks team. And while he's a great player, it's still you can see the age inconsistency in him now as he's getting older. So I guess
and
it's
who
a fair
knows? He may
argument.
even one of these guys even could request a trade. I know they're
True.
comfortable in Chicago because they're legends.
Right.
But like even Robin Leonard, there's no guarantee he'll want to resign, even if you can get him a huge contract, because he knows he'll get the money, but
I
he's
mean,
not going to contend for a cup
here's the
during his
other
tenure
thing.
here in Chicago, probably.
Right, right. And here's the other thing. You're talking about two players who you really don't want to let go in free agency. Granted, they're not until 2023 that I saw that I think that their contract is up. Um,
They're at least halfway through those huge 10-year deals. So
right,
technically, there's still a couple. Yeah, there's still a handful of more years with them.
right. So I guess the question remains is like because you really don't want to just let them do free agency because we've seen what happens with that with Artemi Panarin. We saw what happened with Bobrovsky. We saw like their whole goal was like, well, we're gonna try and re-sign them, and didn't even pursue trading them. And I think we already knew Artemi Panarin was gonna leave, and Bobrovsky was already up in the air. So in that respect, I could see them being like, hey, I want out. Bye. I mean, who knows? Maybe they push back to go back to Quenville in Florida. I mean, could you imagine
Mhm.
putting Jonathan Taves and Patrick Kane on a Florida team? Like, they don't really have any superstars, but you add
That
them
will
on
take
that
them to the
line,
next level.
it
Yeah, that'll
would
take them to the next
that
level.
would make them a team. Now I know Jonathan Taves isn't that superstar captain that we expect anymore. I still think he's star level, but he's just inconsistent right now. I I mean, it would be interesting to see. Maybe they want to go back to Quenville. Maybe Patrick Kane wants to go back to Buffalo. I don't know. And I could speculate that on for hours, but unfortunately, we have to move on. So we'll talk more about Chicago here in a little bit, but when we talk about power rankings and whatnot. But first, let's finish up where we were at. So number 6, Nashville. Ryan, let's start with you. What are your thoughts on Nashville? Good, bad? What do they need to change?
Nashville is underachieving, so I'm going to start with their bad. They're really underachieving. They shouldn't be in sixth place with the talent that they have. Signing Duchesne, moving Subban off the roster, and moving that terrible contract that they had with Subban off the books was a great move. So they're just underachieving for me. Their offense and PK Rene is just fantastic. And Roman Yossi, the star defenseman for them, really good talent. But changes for me, I thought Peter Laviolette needs to go. I think they've become stagnant under his tenure now. I think he's been there long enough. I think his Stanley Cup window has shut. I don't think Nashville's Stanley Cup window has shut, but I do think Peter Laviolette has run its course.
All right, fair. Ryan, or I'm sorry, Will. What is your thoughts on the Nashville situation right now?
Well, the first thing I'll bring up, and this is kind of interesting because this is both a good and a bad in and of itself. Um, they have good defensemen. We know that. I mean, they have Yossi, they have Ellis, and they've been solid, and they've even been great. They're getting fantastic offensive production um, from their defensemen, and it's actually very impressive because Yossi leads the team in points and also has ties the team lead for goals scored. And then you also have Ryan Ellis, who's right below him with the second most offensive points this year. So let's see, what's interesting though is, again, it's impressive, but it's also kind of scary because you're like, okay, where's Philip Forsberg? Where's Matt Duchene? Where's Ryan Johansson? Where's some of these other Victor Arvidsson? Where are these guys that are supposed to be your your main offensive scoring threats? They're getting outperformed by defensemen. I mean, Yossi, we know he's got a shot. Ellis, he gets involved in offense, but I mean, both of those guys aren't what I would consider a Brent Burns type of defenseman. So that right there, I think, is a little bit concerned. It's a good thing, but it's also concerning because their defense is carrying the majority of their offense, which I don't think's ever really a good sign. So that leads to my bad, which is I think some of their offensive players, their top players, need to step up and produce more. Pekka Rinne has been pretty impressive, I will say. I think he maybe could be a little bit better. He's got a 3.02 goals against average. If anything, I think it's their backup that they can maybe use a change at because he never plays well when he plays in a game. And granted, he doesn't play that much because Rinne is one of the best to ever play in between the pipes, so he's going to get the nod most nights. But I think backup goaltending could be a little bit better. And as far as changes, they're going to be a team that they're going to be at the deadline looking to add some scoring depth.
Yep, they're going to be a buyer.
Yeah, they're going to need to buy to save this season because I think they are a playoff team compared to some of the other teams, especially in the Central, that are kind of vying for it right now. I won't spoil that because I know that'll be a topic later in the podcast, but they're going to have to buy some offense at the deadline.
Yeah, I won't talk about Nashville much for sake of time, but um, I agree with almost everything you guys said. Um, I I mean the interesting thing is they still have Philip Forsberg, although I will say this: my opinion of Philip Forsberg is that he's a relatively dirty player, but he is really strong and present in the offensive zone usually. But this season he hasn't really been. Roman Yossi has been really their biggest shining light. I still feel like Pekka Rinne is a bit of an issue when it comes to playoffs. He's kind of got that, not to relate it to football too much, but that Peyton Manning monkey on his back a little bit, which is when playoffs come around, he is either in it or he's not, and usually he's in it for a little bit, and then there's some point where he just dips off. So I'm still kind of hesitant on Rene ever winning a cup. I would definitely agree on the coaching situation, though. Laviolette, I think, needs to go. I feel like he's lost the tone in the locker room. Actually, if you want to talk about coaches for Chicago, and if Nashville lets him go, he would be a coach I would go for. Um, but I'm not sure that they can win under Laviolette right now. They're not. It's just the style of play, I guess, isn't really working out for him right now.
They peaked. Yeah, they peaked, honestly.
Right. And like you said, all the offensive talent is not showing up. All right, so let's move on here. Let's talk about the next one up. At the 5 position, we have the Minnesota Wild. So let's talk about the Minnesota Wild. Will, let's hear what you have to say since they're your rival.
Honestly, for them, I'm actually surprised they're playing as well as they are right now. But I think it's simply the case of like, hey, all of their good players are playing well. Their offense is spread out. You're seeing Eric Stahl have another pretty good season. You see Zach Parise staying healthy finally and having a good season. Jason Zucker, who it's actually been kind of amazing to watch him over his career the last couple of years, kind of being like, a bottom 6 forward to really stepping up and becoming a top 6 and just being involved and being one of the guys to rely on with that offense. Zuccarello has been doing his job too, ended up being a pretty good free agent signing for this team. So all the guys, even their defense, Ryan Sutter, all these guys, they're playing pretty well. And even the guys they acquired in the offseason, they're depth guys, but they're doing their job. So all the right guys are doing the right things. The bad is their goaltending. It's not good. I mean, Devin Dubnyk, I think he's on the downward trend of his career now. Heck, even Alex Stalak has gotten more starts and has more wins than Dubnyk right now, and has actually been playing better, lower goals against average, things like that. And they have like an average to bad power play and penalty kill unit too. So that's why, again, they're kind of like an average team, and their current status is like they're right in the middle. They're not good. They're not bad. I don't really know if they're going to be. I don't think they're going to be sellers at the deadline. I don't think they're going to necessarily be buyers. I don't know their prospect situation, who's up and coming, who's coming up. But if they truly are serious about going into the postseason and they want to make a run, I would say they probably need to acquire more forwards. I would consider maybe another top 6 or bottom 6 forward, add a little bit of depth, or maybe another good scorer. But I think this team's going to stay kind of where they're at right now, because I don't really know how much you want to give up of your future, because they're kind of a team like the Blackhawks too, where they could technically hit the reset button and rebuild, but I think they're really fighting to stay relevant because they too have some pretty solid players that they could win with if they could just put everything together the right way.
Mm-hmm.
Ryan, what are your thoughts on Minnesota?
So you and I have talked about the Wild a little bit on other podcasts and episodes, and I think they need to be sellers in the market. I think they had a tumultuous start to the season. Like, it was bad. And I thought it was going to be bottom feeders, but they really turned around. So that's a good on them to turn it around. Bad, the contracts of Suter and Parisi really hinder what they can do in the market, because they have a lot of money tied up to them, and it's till like they're 39 or something. So it's not good for contract wise. And I think they need to sell Zuccarello to free up some money. And I think they could get a decent amount if a playoff team wanted to go desperate and get a good goal scorer, playmaker. So, and I think for me, it changes. I think they, like the Blackhawks, they might consider hitting the reset button really hard.
So, I want to ask this question because I think it's an interesting comparison here. We're talking about a team they're only what 4 or 5 points outside of Chicago here, and we're talking about a team that is in a different position build wise right now. So, do you guys think that they're still viable in terms of pushing for a playoff position at least in this year, and then going like in the future, do you think that the team they have is still viable in the next couple years? Like how do you guys view this team compared to Chicago? Because I'm hearing Chicago is like it's over, fix it, like just blow it up kind of deal. And with Minnesota, we're talking about a team that it seems to be that you guys are still relatively positive on Minnesota. Am I hearing that correctly?
I am not. They're they're well, they're only 1 point out of the wild card, but you have Winnipeg playing pretty good, Vancouver playing really good hockey, and Edmonton playing pretty good hockey. I don't see them jumping them, and so their only shot would probably be jumping Dallas, and Dallas has really turned it around with their coaching change that they did. So I just don't see where they can boost up the roster and get to where they should be in a playoff position.
I think long term, I'm being positive with them, but also I think in the short term they look okay. Again, like I said, they got the right players on the roster playing well, their leaders playing well. Their goaltending has got to improve if they're going to make a run at all this season. But long term, I look at the Central. The Blues and the Avalanche are going to be the top two teams for quite some time. You're going to have Nashville, Dallas, and Winnipeg in the middle of the pack. I think I would put Minnesota, a little bit above Chicago, but I think it's Minnesota and Chicago. They're the two bottom teams in the Central. I mean, they're the two teams with the most question marks in the future because, yeah, who do they have after Stahl? Who do they have after Parise and Suter when these guys, when they retire, if they end up trading some of these guys off eventually? I haven't seen the bright faces, the bright stars of the future for Minnesota like I haven't seen them for Chicago too. So long term, no, it's not good because all these other teams are younger, they're more complete, they have a nice combination of veterans and young star players coming up. So, Minnesota, yeah, it's a tough decision because they could stay relevant right now, but again, what kind of team are you going to look like in 4 or 5 years? And at the moment, I don't think it's going to look good.
Okay, so you guys are maybe not as positive. You're short term. You're like they look okay right now, but it's
Yeah.
not. It's not a long term thing.
Yeah.
Oh.
Okay. I felt like I had to ask that question a little bit. I will say this. This is two things that I've always said about Minnesota. There's two things that need to change. One is Zach Parise. I can't I can't get behind a Minnesota Wild team with Zach Parise on it. He hasn't been effective in the NHL since New Jersey. And that was when they went to the Stanley Cup final in 2012 against the LA Kings. And ever since then, he's been non-existent. So if you're Minnesota, you get rid of Zach Parise. I 100% agree with that.
I don't think you can move that contract though. That's going to be the tough thing.
True. I guess I'm just saying, like, in the long term, that's something you have to look at. Number two, and this is something you can do short term, is get rid of Bruce Boudreau. He's not a coach that's going to win you a Stanley Cup. It's just not going to happen. Let him go. Find a new coach. I mean, literally anyone else will be a better coach than Bruce Boudreau. You'd rather have Jeremy Colleton behind the bench than Bruce Boudreau, in my opinion, because at least you know what you're getting. With Bruce Boudreau, you get this false sense of hope that you're going to get somewhere in the playoffs if you ever make it, and it's just not going to happen.
Just to put you in perspective, Zach Parise signed till 2025.
Wow.
So wow, that's
at $7.5 million.
That's crazy. That's crazy.
The
Considering
money's not that. It's really not that bad in my opinion compared to some of the contracts. But it's the fact that you got an aging player who.
Well, that's the cap hit, but the base salary and everything is at 9. I mean, it's 9. It goes down, but the average cap hit is $7.5 million.
Which is still kind of a lot, in the NHL, especially. It is,
and, and that's the same contract that Suter has.
I guess I'm a little bit more positive on Suter, but I can understand the argument because he's also aging. I think you could probably still get some years out of Suter more than you can get out of Parise. I have seen more good things out of Suter in the last 2, 3 years than I have out of Zach Parise. Zach Parise was brought in to score goals, and he hasn't done that.
Well, and the thing is, a defenseman, even at an older age, like look at Chara in Boston. Like he doesn't put up a bunch of points, but he's physical. Got a great hockey IQ. I mean, he's still solid because at the end of the day, he's a defenseman. He gets people out of his net. He gets physical when needs be. He'll stand up for his team. He does all the right things. He
True.
does all the right things because of his experience and just that great hockey IQ. But when it comes to forwards, if you're not producing, you're not going to be worth the money, and you're not worth the spot on the team. And that's the thing. I mean, you look at in 39 games this year, 24 points from Parise. It's not bad, but hopefully he could stay healthy because in his tenure in Minnesota, he's never stayed healthy. I think
True.
last year was his best year as far as how many games played, which was 74. But there's a couple seasons he played in 48 games, 60 games, 64. Comes a point in time as average production and missing a lot of time because you're injured. Is that worth keeping? And Minnesota, I think they've been desperate to stay relevant, and that's why they've kept these guys.
And he's never made over 70 points while being with the Wild.
Yeah. I mean, we're talking about a player who was ridiculously offensively threatening when he was with New Jersey.
Oh, for sure.
Like, it was Zajac, Parise, and then Kovalchuk, back when Kovalchuk was still worth something. So, we're talking about a player who was, like, just as threatening as a Patrick Kane, just as threatening as, a Jonathan Taves in his prime, too. We're talking about a player who was definitely worth the pickup from Minnesota's perspective, right? And he just hasn't produced. So
just not at that contract. Oh,
true. So I don't know. I agree. By the way, Ryan, I want to say I agree with you on the Ryan Suter thing that you look at moving him. I'm just saying maybe I like the immediate concern is Parise. And then you look at Suter, because I think you could get maybe 1 year out of Suter, like another year out of Suter if you really wanted to, and still be decent with him. You could put him as a third line defenseman if you really wanted to, and I think you'd be fine with that. But Parise, he's been on like the third and the fourth line and been useless. I don't know exactly what line he's on, but I should probably clarify that. But my point is he's been playing like at that level. So that being said, Minnesota is definitely an interesting topic, and I'm sure we could continue to talk about it more and more. But let's move on. Let's talk about another interesting team that I would love to talk a lot about, but I'm not gonna say a whole lot here. So Winnipeg Jets, they are currently in that fourth position, just outside of a playoff spot in terms of the top three lock. So, Ryan, what are your viewpoints on the Winnipeg Jets?
Connor Hellebuck is so talented and so good. And it's striking to me that he hasn't been able to get them to a Stanley Cup. And Laine's Laine. He'll be good. But he really, since he got his money that he got for that contract that he signed, his holdout didn't work out like he wanted it to for me, because it wasn't like a 2-year contract.
Yeah, I can't remember.
A bridge contract or something, and it just didn't work out the way that I thought it would for him. And so I think they have some talented pieces, and I think they can make a run for the cup. But the bad, I think, for me, it's been depth players. They don't have the depth to really make that strong push to be a contender.
I would agree on that.
Changes, I would trade some players to get some depth players and get some players that buy into the program that they're trying to create there.
Fair. Will, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I agree. I think their bottom six is just like, I don't even know those names. I know Adam Lowry because he's been there, and Nick Shore's a familiar name because he's been on a couple of teams, but I don't know who Mason Appleton is, or Janssen Harkins or Logan Shaw. I mean, You got a couple no names there. I also think their defense. I mean, it's tough if Dustin Bufflin's done playing, which it's kind of looking like it right now. You're gonna that's a defenseman you're gonna have to fill some big shoes in for because of his offensive presence and just his physical dominating presence that he maintains every time he's on the ice. That's going to be tough. So I guess I'm starting with kind of the bad and the changes that need to happen. I think they're definitely going to have to be a buyer. They're going to definitely have to be a buyer at the deadline if they want to be relevant. Well, they're going to be relevant, but if you truly want to make a run in the playoffs, you're going to have to acquire some solid bottom six forwards, and you're going to have to get another defenseman. As far as goaltending, they're excellent. They got one of the best goaltenders in the league right now, so I'm not worried about that at all. And even their backup has been okay this year at times. At times, I say that because he's got a high goals against average. But and the good thing is Patrick Laine's back after having a bad season last year. I would say sluggish. He didn't play up to his potential. He's already got like over half. He's already scored half the points that he had last year with 37. And lastly, their offense in general, it's so spread out. They have three players with 30 plus points. They have 5 or 6 guys with 10 plus goals already. A couple guys approaching that 20 goal mark. So the offensive production's there. Obviously, it's all top 6 heavy. So maybe 2 or 3 moves at the deadline can really make an impact for them, so they can be a legitimate cup contender. I think they're right in the middle right now. I don't think they're a strong cup contender, but they are going to be a talented team that's for sure going to make the playoffs.
Yeah, agreed on all of that. One thing I will add, I think management possibly might want to change. Um, they made a huge push to buy at the last year at the deadline, and I thought they made a really dumb move in trying to get Kevin Hayes, basically buying his contract, I guess, and then they ended up losing Kevin Hayes in the process somehow, and then they gave the Rangers a couple picks, somehow got rid of Trouba and Adam Fox. Not sure how that happened. Uh, so in my opinion, possible look at management, um, because I think some faulty mistakes were made. But I agree with everything else you guys said. I don't really have a whole lot bad to say about Winnipeg. Actually, they're playing relatively well. I thought they would be bottom of the league, when they lost so many people. Bufflin, Fox, Trouba, they lost like the entire right side of their defensive core, and they're actually playing pretty well. Like you said, Patrick Laine is playing pretty strong too. Um, so yeah, I will move on though. Let's talk about another great team right now. In that number 3 spot, the Dallas Stars. So, Will, let's hear what you have to say about Dallas.
Well, credit to them for making that coaching change early on. That really changed the trajectory of the season for them because, as we know, they were not playing well at all. They were actually playing like one of the worst teams.
Mm-hmm.
So the coaching change helped. They recovered from that bad start. You got your players that you could rely on. You got solid defensemen. You have, of course, Tyler Seguin having a fantastic year. I think Joe Pavelski has added some good veteran experience. His production's not huge, but he's not supposed to be a number 1 type of guy anymore. There, I think he's supposed to be a number 2. Given the other guys they have, Corey Perry has quietly added some good veteran experience as well. But I've always liked Dallas for their defensemen. I think they've had some really solid defensemen, some of those young up and coming guys that I think they're going to have for many years to come. So I'm a fan. I even like their third pairing of with Roman Polak and Sekera. So you got some veteran guys that have been on some Stanley Cup teams or been at least in Stanley Cup playoffs quite a few times in their careers. So I think they have a nice combination of good young talent leading the way, and also some of that veteran experience, that veteran depth as well. I think that's always a good combination to have, and Dallas does have that. Lastly, the only thing they got to work on is really comes in the fact that their power play isn't good at all. They're one of the worst. Their goaltending's okay. Ben Bishop has to be better. Actually, despite me talking how good their defense is, they allow the third most goals in the league. So they might have good offensive defensemen, and like I said, even like with the Predators, they get in the mix on their opponent's blue line, but you can't allow the third most goals in the league and expect to make it to the playoffs or have a great Stanley Cup run. So I think they can add another winger or center for more depth. I don't think they need to change anything at goaltender or defenseman. They have the guys. I think it's an internal thing where, hey, we got to play better. I think it's as simple as that. Maybe add a little depth for that run. But yeah, Dallas pretty good. I don't think there's a strong cup contender because, again, allowing the third most goals in the league, that's not going to get you far.
Okay. I can understand that. Ryan, what are your thoughts on Dallas?
I wanted to highlight their good in Tyler Sagan and Miro Heiskanen. Both of them are top at points and everything in their respective positions. One being offensive forward, and then one being a defenseman leading in points for defense. So I think they're really good at that point. And Ben Bishop, yes, he does need to play better, but I think he's been solid enough to get them to a playoff position, and you can see it in the standings. Bad, their number one line needs to do more, I think, because they were doing fantastic last year around this time, and they did well in the playoffs after that. But this year it's been a total mess with that first line, and it was a power line. Like, it was up there with the MGM line of Colorado and the Bergeron, Marchand, and Pasternak line of the Boston Bruins. So it was up there with a good line. So that needs to be going. And I think they're a little underachieving. So changes, I would say mix that first line up and get it going.
Okay. I the only thing I'll add is I think their offense is actually, I mean, while they have strong depth players, I actually for what they have, I think their offense is actually relatively lacking. I think Pavelski, while yes, he's in that second line center position, I think he could be putting up more numbers. Maybe it's just him trying to get used to a new system. I don't know. And then Corey Perry, granted, he kind of came back from a couple injuries. I would like to see him be more offensively sound, I guess. We all know what a threat Corey Perry can be, and Joe Pavelski. If you add them into the depth scoring along with the decent play, I guess I'll say, of Jamie Benn and Tyler Sagan, I think you have a decent lineup. Right now, I think Tyler Sagan and Jamie Benn are playing average. And the only reason I say that is they're not consistent enough for that top line. I think Tyler Sagan could be scoring more goals. I think Jamie Benn could be scoring more goals. But right now, they're winning games. Can't judge them for too much. And I agree with the goaltending situation as well. I do have a question mark next to coaching. How's that going to work going into the playoffs? Do you try and find someone for the playoffs or before, maybe going into the playoffs, or you just stick with the coach you have? So just a question mark there. Yeah, I don't have a whole lot to add there. Not much to say about Dallas. I think they are a strong cup contender though. And I'll talk about that later. Number 2, Ryan, I'll let you start with this since this is your team, the Colorado Avalanche.
Yes, Colorado, their top line is stellar, like it should be. And Kale McCarr has really proven to be the real deal. Like, he is I think he'll win the Calder. And then Gruby's been an interesting one. Like, we've seen the bad and everything, and we've seen some good in him too. So I'm not really sure what to see him. He's kind of a bipolar little-ish in his play. But bad, Samuel Girard, he turns the puck over so much. and the spin move hasn't worked for him. He's tried it so many times this year, hasn't worked. I think he signed a contract extension for like 7 years, and I really think we need to look at and see if we can move him. Um, Maybe trade Gerard and see what you can do with Johnson too, because he has a no trade call, modified trade clause, and to give maybe Ryan Graves a more solid spot in the lineup, I think that would be beneficial.
Okay. Will, what are your thoughts looking up at the Colorado Avalanche this season and how they're playing?
Well, I envy this team a lot because, and I'll go from good to bad. Not that there's really much bad to say. There's a lot of speed and a lot of skill with this team. They actually, I believe, they still lead the league with the most goals scored. So it's amazed to see the skill set that all these players have and just how fast they are. They are one of the fastest teams in the league, I think. And when I watch them play against my Blackhawks, they smoke them every time because, again, just those young, fresh legs, a lot of talent, a lot of, I know maybe there's some moves that could be made, like Ryan said, and obviously he knows more about that than me because he watches the team on a daily basis and knows all about these guys. But from being an outsider looking in, the Avalanche look to be in a pretty good place. The only thing I would say is just be a little cautious on defense. They're top 10 in the most goals allowed in the league. Um,
Yeah,
the defense, I think you got some flashy offense that comes with it, but at the end of the day, you always have to remember when your defense has to come first. You have to protect your own goal. You have to protect your own net. Um, and lastly, as far as changes, I mean, Ryan would probably know. Ryan's definitely going to know more about this. But again, from my outsider looking in perspective, I feel like maybe add another defenseman, maybe add another bottom six forward. Again, just get some impact depth players, make one or two solid moves at the deadline to really fortify yourself for a run because I think the Avalanche are primed to make that deep run now. I truly think they are.
it's interesting you say that because like I feel like even though they're like top 10 in most letting goals in, they still have they're in second place with goal differential. So that says a lot about their offense. And so I really do agree with you that they're in a prime run. I even might say they could make a Chicago Blackhawks run from 2009 to 2015. And because McKinnon's 24, Mikko Ranson's young, and Landeskog is 26, and then you have Cale Makar young, and so I really think they have a lot of talent that they could really make a deep run.
You guys are set long term. You really are because of you have all that young talent, and I mean, again, the most challenging thing is just being able to keep all those guys. I know every year the salary cap increases slowly but surely, but as long as you guys manage the roster and the contracts the right way, so you don't have to have some really sad cap casualties like the Blackhawks have had to make over the years. I mean, I feel like the Avalanche and the Blues are going to be the two teams running the Central and being up there running the West for, the foreseeable future. Like honestly, they're the most talented teams, and yeah, it's that perfect comment. We're seeing where the league's going right now, and it's all about speed, young talent. It's not a league where we're worried about hitting and fighting anymore. It's still physical, but it's all about the Connor McDavids out there today that you can get these transition goals, transition attacks, and just using speed and skill and finesse to get around your opponents. Even some of the best guys today, like a Duncan Keith or a Jonathan Toews, for as good as they are, they're legends. But guys like Connor McDavid can make him look silly because of that speed and finesse.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I want to sit here and kind of chat about the Colorado Avalanche a little bit since we talked about your Blackhawks a little bit, Will. So, I think it's interesting that you bring up the goal scoring because to me, and Ryan, you know this more than I do probably. I feel like it's the top two lines that are scoring a lot of goals and they're carrying in that, but the bottom two lines to me are like they're there. Like I to me like if I were to change anything in my head, it would be somewhere in the bottom two lines. Get some extra depth players. Not saying that the offense is bad by any stretch of the imagination, because
No.
clearly it's not. But something to fortify that. And then we brought this up, the defense. I think that if you fortify the defense, I think that's the biggest hole I think with Colorado right now. And the weird thing is that Colorado has slowly fixed their issues. I think. I don't
Oh
think.
yes, it's been a long time coming. Like coming back, if you look 3 years ago, we were at a 47-point season.
Yeah, and I think part of that also, like, even so last year you guys, I think, fixed a lot too, because
Hmm.
you brought in someone like a Nazem Kadri who
Well,
kind
he
of,
was he was a new piece this year. He wasn't there last year,
well, I
but
mean, off of last season,
oh
right?
yeah, yeah, yeah.
So I feel like that was something that was like a good pickup from Colorado, right? It wasn't
Hmm.
like it wasn't this superstar pickup, because you don't really need any superstars right now. But you picked up a solid depth player in Nazem Kadri. And goaltending wise, I don't really have any question marks with the goaltending. I think the goaltending's solid enough right now.
For me, it's a little concerning because of Gruby hasn't been given the number one shot ever in his life, and this is his first season with it, and he's had a lot of injuries coming with it. And Frankie has proven to man the fort, and I think he has played better. Francois has played better than Gruby has, and so that's what is a little concerning. And it's going to be interesting when they make the playoffs who gets that start in net, because I know it should be Gruby, but Francois has made a case for it.
Yeah, I guess the thing with the goaltending is gonna be that's gonna be interesting with Colorado is, like, I definitely don't think you have a top 10 goaltender in the league right now.
No.
But with that being said, you definitely have a top two at the very minimum
Yeah.
first line, right?
Hmm.
So I mean, you can people make arguments for Boston all the time. That's the other line, right? So that's why I say top two.
Yeah.
And that's more of an opinion in my from what I'm seeing. But that being said, I definitely think there are some pieces, but I don't think the pieces are massive holes. Maybe in the defensive end, you could make an argument like, "Hey, we definitely need better defense, especially going into the playoffs, right? From a playoff perspective." Um, and I believe this was said, Ryan. You think they're going to be buyers at the deadline? Did I hear
Well,
you say that?
no, but I think they might look into the market. Like Zuccarello should be on the market from the Wild, and I'd look at him to maybe boost up a little top six. But again, we don't really need a top six. We need a maybe a star defenseman. But I with Bowen Byron coming into the mix and coming into the mix next year, I say we wait to see what we have in Bowen because he was the number 4 pick in the draft last year, and he was the top rated defenseman in that draft. So I say wait a little bit, see what you have, because he's turned out pretty good in the World Juniors so far.
Yeah. I mean, I really don't have a whole lot bad to say. My biggest question mark when I wrote down, like, when I was going through all of this with them, is just in the top three teams right now in the Central, they have the weakest defensive core. I'm not saying that as, like, because clearly they're winning games and
Yeah.
they're in the top three, but just out of the top three, they have the weakest, in my opinion,
Oh,
from what
I
I
would
see.
I would completely agree with that. But what we counter it with is amazing offensive scoring and then solid goaltending. So I guess it's a formula of how many goals can we score to make it a win.
Right. And I mean, I guess the big question for Colorado that I wait to see, because I have yet to see this work in the playoffs, but granted I haven't been watching all my life, is offensive talent winning playoff series. Like St. Louis, while yes, they were able to win games with their offense, for the most part, they won more games with their defense. So, like the teams that go all the way to the cup and end up winning the cup, they win because of their defense. Washington won because of their defense. Um, Pittsburgh won because of their defense. While yes, they had good offense along with that. Chicago won because of their defense.
Yes,
Granted, they did
I
have.
was going to bring that up. It's a good point, Josh, because yeah, like Ryan said, the Avalanche do have a great opportunity to be a team that lasts a long time as one of the best and contending for cups and consistently making the playoffs. But the playoffs are a different beast, as we know. There's a lot of parity in this league. Even some of your best teams, like the Lightning last year, just poof, they get swept in the first round after being one of the best teams historically and being the best team in the league last year. That's the thing with hockey, especially in the playoffs. You're not going to be. There's not a lot of 5 or 6 goal scoring games in the postseason because that is when you see the most physical hockey and the most nitty grittiness out of teams to this day. And that's why I think you even see some of the flashy offensive teams struggle because they don't have those grinders. They don't have those depth guys that are very physical. So while the Avalanche may be able to score a bunch of goals right now, I think that's going to change in the playoffs because the playoffs are just a whole other beast. And also, again, like even like the Hawks, for an example, they won those cups not because they scored tons of goals. I mean, they were scoring goals, but it was because of how solid back in the day Seabrook and Keith and Johnny Oduya and Nicholas Chalmerson. Nobody, nobody, even Hawks fans say that Corey Crawford was made to look good because of the defense in front of him. It's not because Corey Crawford's a top 5 goaltender in the league. Some would say he's not even top 15, which I can understand that argument. It's because of how good that defense was. So I would really work on that defense, man, because the playoffs are just a different beast.
I would agree. The only thing I would say, I'll say this: they've done their playoffs run the right way. They've made their bones losing in the first round to a good Nashville team, and then they learned from that experience, and then beat the Calgary Flames handedly, pretty smoothly, I would say, and then gave the Sharks a run for their money in the second round. And so I still think the experience that they have in the playoffs, it says something, and I think they're a cup contender right now.
Yeah, I
I think
still
they are. I agree with that. I think they are.
I wouldn't disagree that they're a cup contender. I'm not disputing that at all, and I would agree. Like, out of all the teams that I've seen with offensive success, they have the best chance to win a series because of it. Tampa Bay last season, I think all of us fell for the whole they have offensive talent, they're gonna win, and bought into that, right? I don't necessarily. I'm naturally skeptical of Colorado, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. It's just I'm kind of just holding my tongue a little bit before I jump onto that bandwagon that they're gonna win cups because of Nathan McKinnon and Gabriel Landeskog, and Mikko Rantanen.
Mika,
You
yeah.
know what I mean? So um, I definitely a cup contender, not a doubt in my mind. Definitely, like if I had to pick like 4 teams, like 2 out of the West and 2 out of the East, they would be in that top 4. Um, so definitely one of those teams. So definitely a team to be paying attention to in this upcoming season, or in the rest of the season, I should say. Um, that being said, I don't want to harp on them for too much because we still have another team that I think is interesting to talk about, and that is the St. Louis Blues because they are in the number 1 spot currently in the Central Division. Will, what do you have to say about the St. Louis Blues being in that number 1 spot?
I'm going to be in a lot of pain talking about this team because, as you guys know, I hate the Blues.
Same.
Biggest rival of the Hawks, really, right now, I'd say. And just, yeah, but I'll let bygones be bygones. I listen. any sport, any of my rivals, I always give credit when it's due, especially when it comes to the Packers with the Bears for football talk. The Blues are the most complete team in this division and perhaps arguably in the Western Conference. They have good depth from top to bottom, offense, defense, goaltending, and they're pretty darn solid. Adding Justin Falk to the mix on defense really solidified them maintaining that cup contending status. I know that, I mean, I can't really find much bad about this team other than the fact that they don't have Vladimir Tarasenko now for the next 5 months because of an injury. So losing your star offensive player, your sniper, one of your best goal scorers, that's going to hurt, and that's something I think they're going to have to look to replace or to add to fill in with him being out. Because I mean, if he's out 5 months, I mean, I don't even know if maybe he'll be back in time in the playoffs late, but he's going to miss quite a bit of time. And if you don't have him for the rest of this year, that's definitely going to hurt your playoff. I'm not sure. I don't want to say playoff chances, but it hurts your team overall as far as threat level goes offensively. When I look at this team, I mean, again, I think they could be buyers at the deadline again. Maybe not super aggressive, but I could see them getting a depth player. And seriously though, I would maybe get aggressive and look for a. I mean, you're gonna have to give up a lot if you're gonna go get a Tarasenko level type of player, but maybe even a tier 2 offensive player that's someone that's going to be capable of scoring goals, can do it on a consistent basis, and really take this team to the next level. Because again, I truly think when I look at the makeup of this team, I mean they are one of the best. Maybe you get a bottom 6 forward, but their defense is pretty solid. The goaltending, there's not much wrong with them, and the Blues are going to be a dangerous team in the playoffs again this year. You wait and see it.
Yeah, I've been really impressed with what St. Louis has been able to do because I didn't see them coming at. They came out of nowhere for me, and I think that it really started with Jordan Binnington. Jordan Binnington has been fantastic, and then, but my only concern for them, I'm looking at their stats right now, and their points for bottom 6 forwards isn't great. I'm counting maybe tops 50 points out of 6 players. That's pretty good, but their bottom line 8 points, 8 points, 2 points. So I could see them going for a bottom 6 forward that could contribute a little bit more. And defense has been stellar. Changes for me would probably try to replace Tarasenko and get a little younger. Not trade him, just replace that point production.
Okay. I'm glad on the clarification, by the way.
Yeah, not replace. Not just
to fill in for now, yeah.
Yeah.
Especially since he's out long term.
Yeah, exactly. And I don't think he'll be ready for playoff. Like a playoff, as we said, playoffs are a different beast. I don't think he could be ready, game ready, fitness ready for the playoffs. I would rest him for the playoffs because that's a risk that you don't want to take for a player that's so talented.
Yeah, he's in an interesting position for sure, Tarasenko. And I mean, the Blues obviously are, I mean, they're hurting without him, but we're talking about a team that's in the number 1 position in the Central Division. So clearly they are doing something right.
Yeah. I mean, question for both of you: would you put him in the lineup in a playoff spot if it's his first game back and everything?
Yes, I would. I think he's. I mean, not only does it. I mean, here's my big reason why you need to give a player like that games to warm up into that position, right? So
yeah, but it's the playoffs,
right? I get that, but like, so like the alternate there's only a certain amount of games, I guess. I guess it depends on who your opponent is. But if St. Louis is deep enough that I don't see a reason why you shouldn't put him in the lineup. You know what I mean? Because all you're doing is you're bumping one of those top forwards that's filling in for him now. You bump them down, and you fill that position. I don't see why you wouldn't do it. Like, if we're talking about, like if we were talking about Colorado, for example, and we were saying like Nathan McKinnon was hurt and he was in that position, and Colorado was like, hey, Nathan's healthy again and he's able to play game one. I don't know if I would do that because they're not deep enough, in my opinion. But St. Louis is deep enough, and they have so many positions covered, and defensively they're secure enough that, and goaltending wise they're secure enough, and coaching wise they're secure enough that I don't see a reason why you shouldn't put him in that position.
Here's the thing. One thing you have to remember too, like part of this time frame of how long he's going to be out, it's not only him like recovering and healing, it's going to be him rehabbing and eventually trying to practice and get back up the game speed and everything. So, um I think there is a chance maybe he could play in the playoffs if the recovery goes well. And I'm kind of with Josh. If his recovery ends well and his rehab and his conditioning, if he's up to par, I'd put him in because again, it's not like he's sitting on the couch at home up until hey, we could play it tomorrow. You're officially healed. You've made it past the timeline. He's going to be rehabbing and conditioning and trying to skate and all that. Eventually, once he gets to that point where the surgery, the injury heals up enough. So again, I think it's just is he gonna make it into that time frame because he got hurt what a month ago. Here we are in December. You got January, February, March, April, May. I mean, you're talking. It's gonna be the middle of the playoffs when he's gonna be ready to go. So I think it is possible. Maybe he just doesn't play in the first round or two.
That's what I was thinking. Like I just don't see him being match ready, and there's a difference between match ready and being healed and ready to play, and especially when it comes to playoff time, I think it's a little dangerous to risk that talent of a player if he's fully fit and he's had maybe he gets put in the minor league team and does well there. Maybe then I bring him back, but unless he does successful tests there, I don't risk him.
So I guess for me, I mean, yeah, it's obviously a play by ear kind of situation, right? You're kind of like you're gonna keep your ear to the ground a little bit and make sure that everything is going well, right? If you're gonna do that, I guess my argument would be we kind of saw that with Patrick Kane though in the 2015 playoffs. I don't think Patrick Kane was exactly match ready when he came back after breaking his collarbone. And I mean, it took him a whole round. I'm not disputing that. It took him basically a whole round to get into that playoff mode.
But just his impact on the ice, like you knew heads were turning by Nashville when he came back because you knew, like, okay, you already know Kane's not the most physical, aggressive guy. That's not what he's there for. He's there to be in the right spot with the puck to shoot and score or make that great pass that lets someone else score. Like Tarasenko's playmaking ability. I mean, Tarasenko's actually more physical than Kane, I would say, but I think it's silly not. I think it's even riskier not to play him, even if he's playing like third or fourth line minutes in that first game or two back. Just him
Right.
being a threat out there and maybe putting the attention on towards towards himself, and that frees up other people too. So
I mean, definitely see that argument. Just to put him as a threat.
Yeah.
But again, he has to be ready enough. Like if he's not, then I'm with you, Ryan. Like if his recovery is taking longer, then yeah, it's not worth potentially damaging him long term.
Yeah, it's all about the risk reward, right? Like, is the risk worth it, right? With Patrick Kane, obviously the risk was worth it, and obviously we know after seeing the whole playoffs, it was definitely worth it. But with Tarasenko, like you said, it depends on where his recovery is, right? I mean, we're assuming that recovery goes super smooth and whatnot and everything. Tarasenko might be one of those players that, yeah, you put him in the lineup on the first night, but you give him 12 minutes of ice time as opposed to 20, right? You know what I mean? You ease him into that time frame. I don't know. That's my argument for it. But again, it's a huge what if. So, and I think they could get far enough without him in the first round, maybe even the second round. I think they could get far enough. They're that deep, in my opinion. I don't know if you guys agree, but that's my
I do.
personal
I
opinion.
I
agree.
do. I mean, they've showed it since being in first place.
So that's my personal opinion on them. I don't see a reason why they, like Ryan said, if they wanted to play it conservative, I think they would be just fine too. I really don't see a reason why not for that. So yeah. That being said, we've gone through everything. Will, I want to kind of bring you to the next portion of our thing. We're going to talk about your power rankings here. We're going to go through our power rankings, and we'll start from bottom to top. And this is based on current play, by the way, for those of you listening. So what we did is, as a summary, we analyzed what all the teams in the division based on current play and where they are right now and how we're watching them play at the current moment. How would we rank them power wise? So, Will, I'm going to put you up here, and here are Will's power rankings. So, at the bottom, you have the Blackhawks. Why don't you start there and work your way up and explain yourself?
So I will say I can't lie that I did factor this into, of course, recent play, but even just the status of all these teams in general, as far as the talent level, taking into account injuries and just roster makeup. And yeah, I got the Blackhawks at the bottom because, again, as we know, the injuries have killed them, and that's why they've been struggling a lot. I mean, defense, they have the worst defense in the league, despite even having good goaltending between the pipes. So bad defense, injuries, lack of offensive production outside of Patrick Kane with goal scoring and everything else. They truly are that team that is so up and down, but they continue to struggle. I think they are the worst team in the Central. And then at 6, the Wild. I know they've been playing better of late, but I just don't know if they can. Again, like I said, they're good players. They're playing well, but I don't know if they can maintain this consistency and maintain playing at a decently high level. Again, their goaltending is a glaring issue that if it wasn't for their offensive production, I think they would be very bad, even a lot worse than what they are. So they have some issues there that they got to fix too. I'm not, even with them playing well lately, I'm not sold on them. Then I have the Stars at 5 because, again, like we said, like allowing the third most goals in the league. That's not good. Ben Bishop has to be better. He hasn't been bad, but he hasn't been great either. And goaltending is huge if you want to win games and go to the playoffs and obviously make that run. Um, I hope Dallas doesn't bank too much on hoping that Joe Pavelski and Corey Perry can lead the way with them. Like it's going to have to be Sagan. It's going to have to be Radulov. It's going to have to be some of those other guys because Corey Perry, the injuries have gotten to him. Joe Pavelski, he's going to fall off eventually. I mean, he's in his upper 30s now. I don't know if you're ever going to see him score another 70 or 80 points again. So I have the Stars. They're playing well lately, but I still not buying into them as being one of the strongest teams. Number 4, right there in the middle of the pack, I have the Predators. Again, great defense. The defense is leading in offensive production. It's kind of a good thing. It's also kind of a bad thing. The Predators are better than what they're playing right now. They're I think they're not underrated, but they're not meeting expectations. Ryan said something about that when he was talking about them, and I agree with that. They're truly better than what they are. So I have them in the middle of the pack because I think they're the team that out of these bottom 4 teams, I think they have the best chance of really kind of perking back up in the second half of the season. And number 3, I have the Jets because again, their offense is just spread out so nicely, and the guy that's supposed to be their best player, Patrick Laine, is playing like that again. Like I said, he already has almost as many points as he scored last year, at least a little bit over half of that mark already. So his resurgence has helped. They just got to work on defense a little bit. And they have one of the best goaltenders in the league, and not only just the division, but the entire league, which is a big plus as well. Number 2, I have the Avalanche. Like I said, I'm a little bit critical of the defense and the goaltending as far as just how many goals are allowed. You already heard my opinion on that. But other than that, that talent, that speed, the skill set that all these top players have, that's the reason why they're one of the best teams in the Western Conference and the league in general, and that continues to show. And then last but not least, the Blues at number one. Well, what could I say? They're leading the West. They're leading the division. I think they're the most complete team as far as depth and just skill and production goes. I know they can maybe another team that can maybe buy at the deadline for some rental players, but they're a pretty solid team with great goaltending. They just have to cope with the loss of Tarasenko, which they've been doing well. I just think at the end of the day in the playoffs, that's going to be some production sorely missed. So they got to go and attack the deadline to get someone to replace that. But other than that, the Blues, they are the best team in the division. They are the best team in the West.
I mean, that's a good explanation. I think overall that's a relatively good explanation, and I think for this, there's a lot. It's like there's a black and white area in the sense of like the top three teams. It's like clearly black and white. The bottom four or five, the bottom four, I should say. The bottom four are kind of in that. Um, it's a gray area, and so there's a little bit of leeway when it comes to that. I think it's a fair. I think what you have is a fair breakdown. So, um, we'll get back to yours here in a little bit. Ryan, I want to get to you. Ryan, you and your rankings are currently up. So, Ryan, let me hear what yours look like.
So I have the Blackhawks in last, like Will. I think what Will said basically said it for me. I think they need to go in rebuild mode, and they just haven't proved that they are a playoff or Stanley Cup team. So I just don't see why not build for the future and try to get better that way and see what you can do. Minnesota, same thing. I don't see them going for a Stanley Cup or a playoff run, even to get the fans excited. So why do you have the pieces that you have? I didn't really understand the Zuccarello signing. I thought he should have gone to a better team where he could make a good Stanley Cup run. And then, unlike Will, I have Nashville in fifth because I think they're underachieving, and that's why I deducted them to fifth because they should be better than they are. And I think recent play has shown that maybe they're not a playoff team. And we'll get to that later. But then fourth, I have Dallas. Again, kind of similar to Nashville. They're a little underachieving. And that's why I have them in fourth. And I don't think I could have put them above Winnipeg, Colorado, or St. Louis. So next, I have Winnipeg. Laine's been Laine. I didn't like the contract he signed, but that's his thing. And then Hellebuck has been really good. He's always been talented, and he's going to be really strong for the U.S. when he plays for them. This one was hard. I debated between putting Colorado and Winnipeg's switch, but I put Colorado second only because I think Colorado, if they didn't have the injuries, they might be in first place right now and leading the West. Because they lost Miko at one point. They lost Landeskog at one point, and they were overlapping. They lost Burakovsky at one point. They were overlapping. They've had a lot of injuries that have put them back. And so I thought about putting them in third, but given the circumstances and the recent play hasn't been great. They've lost, I think 4 straight games or something. It's not been good. But I have them in second because of where they're at in the position. And then obviously St. Louis at first. Will pretty much said it for me that there's really nothing wrong with St. Louis. Even losing their top goal scorer with Tarasenko, they've managed to lead the West. I think that's been amazing.
Yeah, I can't really disagree with that list either, obviously, and looks like you and Will agree on a lot of things there. Um, so I'm gonna transition now into my power rankings. So for me, starting at the bottom, and this will probably surprise both of you. My worst team in terms of power rankings right now is the Nashville Predators. I think with the talent they have, I think with the goaltending they have, I think with the coaching they have, they should not be in the position they're in. I think they are a team of. They should be one of the best teams in terms of goal scoring. They should be one of the top defensive teams. We've seen them be one of the top gritty teams in years past, too. I think they should be in the top three. They should be in the top three. They're not in that position right now, and they haven't played like that all season. So because of that, I have them as the worst team currently. I don't think they've earned where they're at. They're scraping by right now, and the only reason is because they have some talent on their lineup compared to some of the other teams that are in the bottom of the standings. My number 6 position, I have the Minnesota Wild. Again, I think they have more talent than a Chicago Blackhawks team. So because of that, only being somewhat above Chicago is not worth it to me. I think we saw a team that was actually decent last year with like an Eric Stahl and some of these other players that they had as well that were playing relatively hot, not showing up. And goaltending has been an issue. I understand that, but we're talking about a team that was actually somewhat of a threat last season, and they're not a threat this season. So because of that, currently, based on their current lineup, they should be at least where Winnipeg is in the current lineup, which is at that number 4 position in the actual rankings. And number 5, I have Chicago. I think while I think lately they've played a little bit better, and I think they're actually somewhat in games with the talent that they have below the top line, basically. Maybe make an argument for top 2 lines, but I think with the talent they have, I think they're a little. I think they deserve to be in that bottom position. Maybe be in that 6th position instead. But I think they don't have enough talent, and they don't have enough strong players right now to be pushing for anything more than what they're at. So because of that, they're winning some games against some strong teams. They just beat the Islanders, and they've played some strong games over the last week or two. So because of that, I have them at that 5 position. Number 4, Winnipeg. They haven't really moved. I don't know if I can necessarily put them over Dallas like you guys have. I think they should be. I just they're not playing consistent enough for me. Granted, I understand they have some missing players and missing positions and whatnot that they need to fill, but I still think they could be playing better than what they are, or at least more consistently than what they are. I think Dallas is playing more consistently at the current moment. Moving up to number 3, Dallas. While yes, they're not scoring a ton of goals and they still have some problems, not a lot, but they have some problems. I think they still deserve to be in that number 3 position. I think they've earned it. I think they're playing consistently. I think the coaching change helped. If they were not playing as consistently, maybe I would put them in that number 4 position, but they're playing more consistent than Winnipeg right now. Number 2, Colorado. Just for a couple reasons. One, they're not as deep. And it's not a knock against Colorado. I think they're still a strong team. But St. Louis is definitely the deepest team in this division. I think Colorado still has some holes to fill. Not only that, we're talking about like if we put them up against some teams, they'll beat most teams still. So I'm not disputing that. So definitely deserve to be in the top 2. I think the thing that keeps them out of that position, defense and goaltending, are still a bit of a question mark, as we kind of discussed. Offense, clearly not in terms of the first 2 lines. I think once you get to the bottom 6 in terms of depth, not quite there. That kind of all of that combined kind of kept them out of that number 1 spot. And number 1 for me, St. Louis. I don't think this is really a dispute. Most depth oriented team in the, at least in the Western Conference, in my opinion. Um, Goaltending is solid, if not Stanley Cup worthy again. We're talking about a coach who's Stanley Cup worthy again. I don't see a reason why Craig Berube is not going to be in contention for another cup as a coach. And depth, just straight up lines 1 through 4, it's there all over again. Um, Even though with the question marks of Vladimir Tarasenko. Overall, that's my current power rankings. So yeah, I'm gonna put our stuff up side by side here so you guys can see um, what it looks like. Um, so Will, you and Ryan seem to have a lot of similar, if not the exact same, power ranking system from what I understood. Um, I want to make sure that or see if you guys had any questions or um, for each other, I guess, talk about it a little bit.
I well, to kick it back to you maybe a little bit, I kind of agreed with you putting Nashville so at the bottom of the totem pole because they haven't been doing what they should be doing. They are a playoff team and they're just not playing like they are. And I don't know what it is. I think for me it's the stagnant of the coaching situation and them not being able to get that resolved. I think they need to look at a different coach to just get some new blood in there. And but Will, do you have anything that you would like to see from my rankings or expand on yours a little bit?
I guess. I mean, I guess I'll play devil's advocate and defend the Predators a little bit because I think with them again, I think the talent's there, the roster's there. Um, we've all kind of talked about how we're kind of starting to get against like turn against the coach. Like everything's kind of stagnating, and they're kind of it's like if it almost feels like they peaked like a couple of years ago when they went to the Cup,
Mm-hmm.
and I can understand that. But at the end of the day, it's like when you go and make a signing with Matt Duchene and pick him up, you got to hold. He's got to step up and play better. I mean, he hasn't been bad, but he's not making a big impact like we thought. I think it's more of just players. I think this team has underperformed in general. Like I said, when you look at this team, it's great that your top two defensemen are up there with point production as well, but they shouldn't be leading your offense. Philip
No.
Forsberg needs to be better. Matt Duchene needs to be better. Ryan Johansson needs to be better. Nick Bonino, Victor Arvidsson, I'm Kyle Turris, like all these guys, having 15 to 20 points this late in the season now, like we're right about
Halfway.
we're at that halfway point. Some of these guys they have to produce better. Roman Yossi and Ryan Ellis should not have the most points on your offense. As good as they are, it's nothing against them. You need to have forwards producing, your goal scorers producing. So I think the talent's there. It's just the second half of the season they're going to have to turn it around, and that's why at the end of the day, I truly think they're a team that's in the middle of the pack because that's kind of where they're at. They're kind of in the middle state where they're drifting towards being bad sometimes. Then they have potential and they're good. I just think that pendulum's going to swing in the right way for them eventually here.
Yeah.
I guess that it's a possibility, I guess. I'm still hesitant on that, but I definitely agree that we're talking about, like, on paper, we're talking about a Nashville Predators team that on paper coming into this season, everyone was like, that's a scary team, right? We're talking about a team that everyone was like possibly a cup contending team. You could make an argument for it. Right now, we're not seeing it. So because of that, I didn't want to play the what if game, and so because of that, that's why I put them at number 7 to kind of answer that question. Um,
I'm just surprised, if you don't mind me cutting in. I'm just surprised in a way because even with just look, and I know we're talking about play recently, but I feel like it's gotta go past that to a
Yeah.
point because when you look at the rosters, like I said, the Predators, they have I would argue probably the second best goalie in the Central Division and one of the best in the Western Conference in general. They have a pretty good roster from top to bottom.
Mm-hmm.
If you're asking me to pick the Predators roster over some of these other teams like the Stars, the Wild, I'm taking them. I'd maybe even take the Predators roster over the Jets because they have really good offense. But I'm looking at some of the defensive pairings in Nashville too. That roster is a lot better than the way they're playing, and that's why I think they truly are better than like the Stars, the Wild, and the Blackhawks. I mean, that roster kind of ranks up there as far as like Blues Avalanche discussion for top three.
Yeah, if I'm a GM and I get to pick the roster I want out of the Central Division, it'd probably go Colorado, St. Louis, then Predators.
Same here.
I guess that's fair. If we're making the argument for that, I would agree. I think they're one of the deepest lines in the lineups in possible in the Western Conference for sure. Possibly even make an argument all of the NHL, right? So I think that's a fair argument. In my opinion, hard underperforming though. I mean, we're talking. That's why I made that argument, and I stand by it. I think they're not playing well enough, even though on paper they look great, right? I mean, we're watching a Winnipeg Jets team that on paper everyone was like, they're gone, they're donezo for the rest of the season because they lost so many players, right?
But all
And
of their main players are stepping up and playing well. Like, that's the same credit I was giving to the Wild. I got to give it to the Jets too. That they may not have the most stacked roster from top to bottom, but when your top 4 or 5 players are playing pretty well, then that's how you stay in playoff contention.
right, and see, I mean, that's why I say, in my opinion, the Wild are playing better than the Predators. Because, I mean, I didn't really expect them to be doing super well this season, but um, part of it is expectations to me, right? Like, if I look at your team on paper, my expectation is, all right, this team, like Tampa Bay, if I look at Tampa Bay on paper, I know we're not talking about Tampa Bay, but I'm using them as an example. If we're talking about Tampa Bay, on paper they're a huge threat, but otherwise, not really. So that's why right now they're not really playing that way, right? So that's why I have Nashville's kind of the same way. Okay, so let's. I'm gonna go through this and just a simple yes or no. That's all I'm gonna ask for. A simple yes or no. A little bit playoff prediction. Starting with, we'll just start at the bottom. So, Blackhawks. Do you think they're a Stanley Cup contender, Will?
Nope.
You don't. Do you think they make? Let me rephrase that. Do you think they make the playoffs? Is what I should.
Nope, not at all. Not even going to be close.
Ryan.
No.
Okay. I agree with that as well. Number 6 is currently Nashville. Will, do you think they're a Stanley Cup playoff?
Yes. Yes.
So Will, even though they're number 6, you think they'll make the playoffs?
I think they're going to turn it around in the second half. Yes.
Okay, Ryan.
I think so too.
Okay, I'm gonna say no. I don't think they make it. Possibly a bubble team, but I don't think they make it. Number 5, Minnesota currently. Will, what do you think?
Minnesota, no.
Ryan.
No.
I agree. I don't think they are. Number 4, Winnipeg. Will.
Winnipeg, I'm going to go yes.
Okay, Ryan.
Yes.
I agree. I think they are a wild card team, but I think they make the playoffs. Number 3, Dallas. Will, what do you think?
No, not buying it.
You don't think they make the playoffs?
Mm-mm.
Okay, Ryan.
Neither do I. I think Nashville turns it around and Winnipeg boots them out.
Okay, I'm gonna go with yes. I think they are. So number 2, Colorado. Will, what do you think?
Most definitely yes.
Okay, and Ryan, what do you think?
Yes. Playoff team.
Okay. And finally, number one. I'll give mine too. Yeah, they're a playoff team in my opinion. Number one, St. Louis. Will, do you think so?
Oh yeah, for sure, no doubt about it.
Ryan?
Yes, for sure.
Okay, I agree. I 100% agree on that. So interesting. We have a little bit difference of opinion in terms of who makes the playoffs and who doesn't, and I'm actually kind of glad about that because, well, now we can see if who's right and who's wrong.
True. Yeah. See who's gonna get the bragging rights.
So, and it won't be me, by the way, because I'm never right.
I'm not usually either, so we'll see. I might be with you on that one.
It's Ryan. Ryan's gonna get it all.
Yeah. With my luck, yeah, maybe.
All right. Well, that is everything we had to talk about today. A little bit longer than a normal podcast, but I wanted to give Will and Ryan a chance to kind of break down their teams. I thought it was fair for that. I know Will really wanted to talk about the Blackhawks.
More like trashing my team.
No, well, that's your own fault, I guess, in that sense, right?
No, it's their fault. Do better.
Well, true. Yeah. Also true. But because we talked about Will's team, I wanted to give Ryan a little bit of a chance to defend his team a little bit too, because we haven't really talked about the Avalanche lately. And so I wanted to give him a chance for that. So that's why we went a little bit longer than normal. Thank you all for watching. I know this was a long podcast, but I hope you guys enjoyed. I really don't have a whole lot more to say. Will, thank you so much for coming on. I hope you can come on in the future. I know.
Yes, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
I know.
Yeah, thanks for coming on.
Yeah.
It was good talking to you too, Ryan.
Yeah.
And I would love to have you on, even if it's a much shorter podcast. We'll find something to bring you on, because I enjoy your topics or your inputs on the topics and whatnot. So.
Oh yeah, for sure.
So thank you very much for coming on, Will. And Will, go ahead and plug yourself really quick, and then we'll wrap this up.
All right. Of course, again, you can follow me on Twitter at WHATCZEL on Twitter for all of my fantastic sports opinions and coverage. Also, you can catch my radio show, Windy City Sports Talk, on sportstownchicago.com, or you could search it on the TuneIn app and listen there. Or if you want the live stream video and interact with me on the comment section on the live stream video, go to Facebook and just type in Sportstown Chicago, and then you'll see the Windy City Sports video come up every Wednesday, 3 to 5 p.m. Central Time, 4 to 6 p.m. Eastern Time. All opinions are welcome, even if you're a Packers fan or a Blues fan or whatever. I won't be mad. I talk to the rivals and give them credit when it's due as well. So you can catch me there every week, okay?
Yeah, and please tune into Will's stuff. Ryan and I, obviously, I'll give our little plug, and then we'll end it here. We're on PodBean. Captains at Center Ice is the title of it on PodBean. Link is in the description if you're watching on YouTube, and link for the YouTube channel is in the description of the PodBean podcast if you're listening to this on PodBean. All our episodes are on YouTube. The PodBean ones, it's only basically the 5 most recent episodes due to our constrictions that we have on PodBean right now. So because of that, it'll only be the 5 most recent ones. Otherwise, you can find all of our podcasts on YouTube. Plus, there's video on YouTube, so you can watch our faces as we're talking. Plus, there's some graphics that you'll be seeing, like the power rankings and whatnot. That being said, I hope you guys enjoyed. Leave a like, comment, and subscribe. Let us know what you thought of the podcast. And I hope you guys enjoy. Will and Ryan, we're signing out as well. So thank you for listening, and we'll see you in the next one. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for tuning in to today's episode. As always, like I said before, like and subscribe, and leave a comment down below on what you thought about today's topics. Thank you for joining the Captains at Center Ice, and we'll see you in the next episode.